Welcome back, everyone, to our second episode in the Eyewitness Encounters podcast. I'm your host, What Lurks Beneath, also known as Josh, and it is so good to be back after such a long hiatus. Today, we've got a very special guest with us, Chewy, who's had a number of bizarre and strange encounters himself, Bigfoot and Dogman. Chewy, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
All right. Well, first of all, Josh, I just want to say thanks so much, man, for having me on your show. I love your show. It has some awesome encounters. Well, as Josh said, my name is Chewy, and I live here in southern Idaho. I live in Twin Falls, which is right on the Snake River Canyon. And what I do, I'm a pastor here at my local church, and I do a lot of youth ministry, counseling. We do a lot of awesome stuff in our community, and my wife is actually a teacher, and she does all the ministry alongside me. We kind of do it all together, and Idaho is an awesome place to live. Just to give our viewers kind of the rundown of what the location looks like. So Twin Falls is known as a city on the edge because it's literally right on the rim of this huge canyon. And this canyon's actually deeper than the Grand Canyon. So it's just this massive canyon, and it goes for hundreds of miles, and it branches off into smaller canyons all over. And so it's just a beautiful area. And this is actually like a desert area. And I live in the area is called the Magic Valley, and it's this valley, and we're surrounded by the Sawtooth Mountains, the Smoky Mountains, just a beautiful area. And just maybe 20 minutes north of Twin Falls is what is called the Ice Caves and the Mammoth Caves, and it's actually the largest lava cave system in the world. So, and it's not too far at all. So it's really beautiful. Here it's desert, but it's just, it's an amazing area. So that's where I live. So kind of, I first moved to this house that I'm at now in 2017. And, it's just a beautiful area, nice little neighborhood. And I live right on the maybe 3 blocks tops from the canyon. And the canyon by my house is called the Rock Creek Canyon. It's one of those little break-offs that I was talking about. It's not as big as that huge one, but it's kind of the canyon spider webs kind of is what it does, and it runs right through the city, those little break-offs. So my city is maybe about 60,000 people. So the canyon's right by my house, and so we often, go for bike rides on the canyon rim. It's just a beautiful area. And the main canyon, people come from all around the world to see it. This is one of the very few places in the world where people go, parachuting. They jump off the canyon with their parachutes. It's just an amazing area. So when we first moved here in 2017, my wife and I and my 2 daughters, I got an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old, we go walking just to kind of see the area. It's like our first week here or something like that. And so it's summertime, and we're walking on this canyon rim, and right across on the other side of the canyon is a livestock commission where, they bring all these cattle in from northern Idaho and different parts of the West Coast, and they sell them, they auction them off and everything. So, and that's like directly on the other side. So we're on my side, which is a beautiful trail, and it's just a gorgeous area. So we're going down there, and I wanted to go in the canyon, like go look for a trail to walk. And so there was this guy who was outside of his house, and he's like the closest house to that canyon. And I asked him, like, hey, introduce myself. We're new to the neighborhood. I want to know if you know about a trail that goes down to this part of the canyon. And he said, no, there is not a trail that leads on this part of the canyon. You have to go to another part of the canyon to go on the trail. And so, but me, I just went anyway. I just went to go look, and we did find a little trail, and we just went about halfway down, enjoyed the beauty of it, and we came back up. And literally a week later, tops, the city of Twin Falls came and they put up this giant fence on this part of the canyon. And well, I'm talking about these huge welded barred fence, like these bars on it, it says keep out, no trespassing and all this stuff. So I thought it was a little suspicious that would happen, and the guy was like not recommending that we should go down there. So, and me being a pastor, where I have a buddy by the name of Raymond, and he's a federal investigator, and he's employed by the states, but he's a federal investigator. So I can't give his real name, but we're calling him Raymond. But at church one day, I saw a white truck with a Bigfoot sticker on the back of it. And that's when I seen it was his truck, and we just started a conversation. I said, hey, man, I love that sticker. Where'd you get it? And we started talking. And then our relationship just kind of grew. We're like best friends now. And he began to tell me all these encounters, like, hey, Bigfoot is here. There's stories of him being here in the canyon, encounters all throughout this area. And I was blown away. I was like, what? I was like, you serious? I was like, that's pretty amazing. And then I told him about the fence that they put up. And he goes, that sounds kind of suspicious. I go, doesn't it? So we decided to kind of go on an adventure. We decided like, hey, let's go walk around there and just to see why they don't want us in there, or just, if there are Bigfoots down here, or like what's going on. Are they traveling through? Because this canyon, like I said, it goes hundreds of miles. It goes all the way up to the mountains. It goes to Nevada. It just stretches everywhere. So we decide to go down there. And again, I live just 3 blocks tops from this canyon. And so he comes to my house, and we get our gear. It's daytime. We were not planning on staying till it got dark. We didn't want to be down there that late. So we drive my Explorer, and we go park on the canyon rim, and we, get our backpacks and stuff, and we go walking down there. And this is like my first, I guess you would call it, investigation or adventure, or whatever you want to call it. And he's done several of these. Like, he has many years doing this, and plus for what he does as a federal investigator, he's always outside. That's part of his job, is investigating things outside. And so we're walking down there, and we're just having a good time. We're just talking about cryptids, talking about, church stuff, our families. And you can take a piece of grass and put it through, on your thumbs, and you can do like wounded rabbit calls and stuff. And so we tried that just to see if there was any predators or something that was trying to get an easy meal. And so we started doing that, and all of a sudden we heard this giant growl. I mean, it was a massive growl, and it reminded me of a cougar. I thought it was a mountain lion. And so we're like, wow, this is getting real, like really quick. And just so you guys know, the area here inside the canyon, it looks like the Amazon. You walk down there, and the trees are, it's just overgrown trees, the shrubs. There's all kinds of cool vegetation down there. And there's Russian olives. And those of you guys who don't know what a Russian olive looks like, it's really windy and spidery kind of a tree. So it looks like the Hobbit, or like the Lord of the Rings kind of a feel down there. And it's trippy because you're on top and you go down, and it's like a whole nother world. It's pretty amazing. And there's a creek in the middle. So anyways, we hear that giant growl, and we start to back up, and literally, man, like there's a big tree. I think it was an oak tree next to us, and about 10 to 12 feet up this tree, there's just this tree is just shredded. Like somebody took a chainsaw and just shredded the heck out of this tree, 10 to 12 foot up. And so we were like, whoa, that is really cool looking. We took some pictures and stuff. And so we started backing out, and we went the opposite way. We're like, okay, we heard the cougar, I don't know if we should mess with that or whatever it was. We weren't 100% sure. So we go taking off the other way. And again, we start talking again, having a great time. This is our first adventure together. And before we know it, it starts getting dark. And we're maybe like 45 minutes from my Explorer. And the canyon, it gets dark really fast. It could be still light up here as the sun is setting, but inside the canyon, because it's so deep, it's like pitch black. It's like really black. And then a certain parts of that canyon trail down there, there's a canopy of trees. And so it's like you can't see the sky, it's really dark in there. So when it gets dark, it's pitch black under the canopy. And then as you come out of the canopy, you can see, the moonlight kind of lights stuff up a little better. But so we're walking, and that's when we realized, like, man, it got dark on us. Like, we're having such a good time, and we didn't have flashlights or anything, and our phone life was really low, and so we wanted to conserve the battery in case of an emergency to make a call or whatever. And so we're walking, and then we start hearing like foliage moving, like brushes, the brushes, like something's in the trees, and we could hear walking, and I'm already like freaked out. I'm already scared. Like as soon as I started hearing that noise and we went into that black canopy, like I just had the heebie-jeebies, man. It's like, I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain when you can't. It's like a primal fear almost. Like I felt like I was in danger, but I didn't want to look like a little sissy, so I didn't say anything. And we keep walking, and then we hear these noises, and then we're both like, you hear that, right? Like a twig broke, and we hear like there's multiple animals or whatever around us, but we couldn't see them because it was so pitch black. And we're walking, and all of a sudden I see this like a black mass in front of us. And again, this thing was dark. I mean, it was blacker than the black around it. And like I said, it's already really, really dark down there. But I see this black mass, maybe 50, 75 feet or so in front of us. And I'm praying in my mind. I'm like, I hope that this is like a small tree or it's a stump or something. And all of a sudden, it just took like 3 steps and zipped across the trail. And this is like a 30-foot wide trail, and it just went across it like nothing. And it looked like it was like 8-9 foot tall, massive thing. Like, at least 400 or 500 pounds or something, because it just was the bulk of it. And we didn't really get to see features of it, except that it was huge and it was blacker than the black, and it ran across the trail faster than I could, for sure. Than anybody I know could cross that wide of a distance in like 3 strides. And so I didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. My heart dropped, and because I was already hearing the stuff. This is my first time doing this, and my friend Raymond, he's been doing it for years, and so I was hoping my eyes were playing tricks on me. Like, that didn't just happen. And all of a sudden, he said, the creature just passed in front of us, and my heart dropped. I lost it. When you have like your worst fear and you're hoping and you're praying, like that didn't just happen. That's not real. And then somebody confirms it. So he confirmed it, and we stopped in our tracks, and I became unglued. I'm like, man, we got to go. We got to go right now. And he has a gun on him. He has like a 41 caliber, big old revolver with, it's a pretty powerful gun. And I had a pocket knife, And so I felt like really sketched out, and we start backing up, and then we could hear the brush again moving, but it was like moving with us, like paralleling us. And it sounded like there was more than one creature, or because it sounded in multiple locations. And so he has his gun, and we don't have any lights, and he's not pointing it at it, but he has his gun drawn, like just in case, in case something happens. And so we're backing it up, and we could hear this thing or things following us all the way through the canopy. And as soon as we hit the part where the canopy ends and it kind of opens up in the moonlight, whatever it was did not come into that light. It like stayed in the darkness. And so we knew it wasn't following us anymore, but we didn't turn our backs. You know, he was facing it and I was facing the other way. We were almost like back to back, like pretty much the whole way. And so we got out of that canopy, and once we got a good distance from the canopy, we knew that it wasn't following us anymore. Like we couldn't hear it, I guess you could say. So we hightailed it. As soon as felt like we were okay, safe to run, we did a, you know, like we like to say, man, I don't run from anybody. Well, that day, I tell you what, I'm a grown man, and I ran, you know, and he ran too. And so we ran back up to my Explorer. We got in, and we drove to my house. And my house, again, is 3 blocks from this place. And we get into my man cave. I have a man cave in my house where, you know, I have a map of encounters. You know, we have my TV, a couch. We do watch a lot of videos and listen to podcasts. So we get to my man cave, and I have a bottle of Jameson whiskey. And so I popped that baby open, and I poured us both a drink. And I'm like, dude, what the heck just happened? I'm like, that didn't just happen. And he's like, oh, yeah, man. He goes, it was down there. And it did not want us in there. We were basically escorted out because they were making noises and following us until we got out of there. So we were having a good time, like recapping. They were like, wow, that was nuts. And I couldn't believe it. I'm like, it's just down the street from my house. This is crazy. So I didn't tell my wife anything. You know, she knew we were going down there to kind of check out the area, and she knows that we both believe in Bigfoot. So, and because she doesn't mess with any of this stuff. She's a believer, but she doesn't want to mess with it. You know, that's her belief system anyway. You know, she's a devout Christian woman, and her belief is like she doesn't want to mess with it. She doesn't even want to go there. So I just told her, like, yeah, we heard something, babe. We heard like stuff moving around and stuff. And she's like, oh, that's cool, you know. And so I didn't really tell her that much. And about a week later, and by the way, this is in when I first moved here, it was in September, and it was still really hot that year. And so now it was about November, and it started snowing here in Idaho, you know, depending on the season or whatever. But that year it started snowing in early November. So I remember, you know, my wife in the morning, she like, when I woke up, she came to me, she's like, hey, she's like, something happened last night. And I'm like, what happened? And she says that we were sleeping, both of us in our room, and she said she heard a huge thump on top of our roof. And I'm like, what do you mean a thump? She's like, something big was on top of our roof. And I'm like, what? I'm like, are you sure? She goes, I heard it walking around. She goes, it was walking like it was on 2 legs on top of right where our bed was at, like it was directly above us. And she said she was frozen in fear, so that she couldn't move, that she was trying to wake me up, but she couldn't move. And then she started praying in her mind. And then it started whatever it was that for whatever reason she couldn't move, it left. And she waited a while, and she got confused. She's like, was that a dream? She goes, I must have been dreaming. I hope I was dreaming, she was saying. So she didn't wake me up, and she ended up going back to sleep, hoping it was a dream. I honestly thought that she thought it was a dream. And so what I did, I go outside, and I'm like on my roof, and there's snow already. So I go out there, and I look, and there's these, and it was snowing, but there was tracks on top of my roof, and the fresh snow covered them because it was snowing all night, but I could see the tracks there. I could see them. And I have those pictures, Josh, and, you know, if you want to put them up here, feel free to do that. And I looked to my neighbor's house, and they're on their house too, on their roof. And then on the house next to them, like it was walking on the rooftops, and it was headed towards the canyon. You know, there's only a few houses on my street, and then, you know, it goes down the street, and there's the canyon. So I'm thinking like, man, I hope that was a bird or something, or what's going on. Like I don't know, but the snow was covering them, but you could still see tracks. It looked bipedal, man, like it was something walking. Really, really strange. So I'm just tripping and thinking worst case scenario, and then praying about it. I'm like, man, no, it had to have been a bird or a raccoon or something, And so about a week later, after that, something woke me up around 3 or 4 in the morning. I hear a loud thump, and it just startles me, and I wake up, and I'm like, did I hear something, or did I feel something, or what's going on, And I could hear the blizzard outside. There's a blizzard, and if those of you guys who don't know what an Idaho blizzard is like, I mean, it is intense. The snow gust is just going everywhere. You can't hide from it. It comes from every direction, and the wind is so loud. Somebody could be in your driveway and honking, and you can't even hear them because that's how intense it can get. So the blizzard started to die down, and it started to get really, really quiet. And so I got up and I checked on my daughters. They each have their own room, and they're both sleeping. I check all the doors. All the doors are locked, and I'm like, something woke me up. I don't know what it was, and my thought was going towards the roof. I'm like, man, I was like, I hope this is not happening. I hope it's not happening. And once daylight comes, I go outside. I'm like, there's not going to be anything on my roof. There won't be. There can't be anything up there. But sure enough, there was freaking tracks on my roof again, man. And it was right above my bedroom. And again, I looked to the left, and there was tracks on their roof, and on the house next to them, tracks on their roof. And like it was traveling again towards the canyon. And my house is a really tall house. I had vaulted ceilings. And so I'm like looking up, like, how in the heck can something get up there? I'm like, what? I'm like, this is really, really weird. And so I took some pictures of them, and Josh, you're free to put those up if you can. People want to see them, but they weren't human tracks. My thought was Bigfoot. I'm like, this Bigfoot came to my house. It followed me home and got on my roof and traveled to the canyon back and forth on our roofs. I'm like, what? And they weren't humanoid, like I said. They were like really weird. I can describe them as a triangle, kind of like they were wide on one end, and on the back side it got thin, really strange, and you could see like claw marks and stuff. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? So I call Raymond up, and he comes over, and he's like, I'm talking to him like, man, I think a Bigfoot followed us home that night. The thing that we saw in the canyon. And he looks at me. He goes, bro. He goes, that's not a Bigfoot. He goes, that's a Dogman. And I'm like, a Dogman? I've never heard of the term Dogman. So I start researching. I get on the internet, and I Google Dogman. It sounded kind of funky to me here, and I thought it was I didn't know what to think about it. But literally the first podcast or episode on, I don't remember what website it was or what channel it was, but they were talking about this Dogman being on their roof. And when I saw that, dude, my heart just freaking dropped. I didn't know what to do. I got like scared. I was scared for my family. I was everywhere. And so what I did is I went in and I bought some firearms. I bought some high caliber rifles. I got an alarm system in my whole house, every window, every door. If somebody or something opens it, it's going to let us know, and because I was researching, and they're like, yeah, they try to draw kids outside and stuff. And I'm like, oh, heck no, I'm not going to deal with this. And so we were praying, and we do all this stuff to try to take whatever measures we can. And I'm still in shock. Like, I can't believe this, what's going on. And so I do believe that a Dogman followed me home. And I thought it was a Bigfoot because it was huge. It was on two legs. It jumped, or, it went across that trail like nothing. And it didn't come into the light. So I'm like, oh, it's a Bigfoot, but I'm like, that confirmed it with me, seeing how those tracks looked and hearing all these encounters. of them going on people's rooftops. So that really kind of messed me up, man. It I don't think anybody should have to live like that, like in that fear of, like, how do you defend yourself over something that's not supposed to exist? It's like, what do you do if it's not supposed to be here?
Right, and that's something that's terrifying, that what you went through. I mean, I've gotten sent multiple stories and things like that I'm sure you've heard and everybody else has heard, where demons or some sort of cryptid Bigfoot Dogman is on somebody's roof, or like, trying to tap on the walls or trying to like break into the house. Like there always seemed to be this common theme of where they're trying to get into the house for some reason, or maybe not into the house, but just enough to terrify you. Because obviously we all know, listening to this, that these beings possess such a supernatural strength that if they really wanted to, they can get into the house. But it's like they don't. They're just there to kind of like let you know that they're there, just so that way they can terrify you. And it's very almost demonic in nature.
Yeah, that sounds predatory, man.
Yeah, predatory. That's a good word for it.
Yeah, it is. So doing the research, and I mean, I just went full blown, dude. I started researching as much as I could. I listening to all the podcasts that I could. That's how I found yours. Just going everywhere, just getting as much info as I could. And I'd like to sit here and say that was the last time something weird happened at my home, but it's not, man. And whatever, this creature has kind of terrorized us and terrorized my kids and my wife. And it's just been, I did not expect that to happen, going down there looking we weren't even expecting to look to see a Bigfoot. We just wanted to see if there was signs of them or whatever, And my daughter, soon after that, she comes and she tells me, she's like, Dad, she goes, I heard tapping on my window last night. And I'm like, oh, you did? She goes, yeah. She goes, I think it was a rock. She goes, it sounded like somebody took a rock and tapped on my window. And my mind was like, she doesn't know. I didn't tell her. I'm like, for me, I was like, that's a freaking claw. Something that is hard and taps on your window. Her mind is like, oh, it sounded like somebody was tapping with a rock. But I think it was a claw or whatever, something with fingers tapping late at night. And again, thank God I got my alarm system, because I'm trying to do my best. Like I was in shock, dude. I didn't know where to go, who to talk. Like, thank God for my buddy Raymond, because he has, his sons, and he works for the federal government. And he's like, man, if anything goes down, he goes, I don't live far from you. He goes, I'm headed straight over there. We're all going to come and we're going to be packing. They got all kinds of high caliber rifles and heavy duty stuff. And his sons are grown up. And so they had my back. They still do, big time. And so hearing that tapping and her not knowing what's going on, and then I have a little Shih Tzu Chihuahua mix, little dog, and like at 3-4 in the morning, around that time, she would start barking at the wall, like towards this, like high up towards the ceiling on the wall where it goes outside, and so I'll go and I'll turn on and off the lights outside, just to see, well, man, maybe it'll deter it, but I always keep my lights on, So weird stuff like that has been happening. And, since this whole COVID-19 stuff, my wife, her being a teacher, let me back up real quick. So that was in November when this dogman followed me home, and the tapping on the window was kind of in between all that. And on New Year's, we bought some fireworks. It's freezing, and we bought fireworks, and we're the only ones on the street that were popping them. And I bought a pretty cool heavy-duty one. It was pretty awesome. My kids love those, by the way. So we light one in the street, and it's going and it's popping and making all the whistling and all the flares and the fountains. It's just beautiful. And over all that noise, bro, we heard the loudest, I would say the most pissed off. It sounded pissed, whatever it was. It was like a scream, like a howl mixed. It was really weird. And and my wife's like, what is that? No, she's like, what is that? And it took a second for me to grasp, like, oh, that's not this, it's something else. And then it gets louder and louder, like just mad. And then when the firework goes down and is done, this thing is still yelling, like it hasn't stopped. And this is a firework that goes on. I mean, it had to have been a minute, bro, at least a minute. And this thing was still, and like at one breath or whatever, like it didn't stop. It just kept going. And it was from the canyon. It was coming from the canyon area. And I'm like, oh man, I'm like, I'm done. I'm like, our fireworks show is cut short tonight, guys. Come inside. And so we went inside. But I remember that, like everybody were like, we could hear it, dude, just bellowing through that canyon, like it was pissed off. And so that happened then. And like I was saying, my wife being a teacher, with the whole COVID-19, she was teaching online, and she does, grading and all that outside on our, on our back porch. And so this was, I think, in April, might have even been May. But she's out there grading, and then I'm in here doing something in my man cave. And it's in the middle of day, bro. This is daytime, right? She comes in and she's like, has like tears in her eyes, and I'm like, whoa. I'm like, what's wrong? I'm like freaking out, like, are the kids okay? And she's like, something just looked at me across the fence. I'm like, what? She said a black, like, dog head looked over the fence at her. And she said she said it looked like those black German shepherds kind of a thing, but its ears were like a Doberman pinscher, like really, really big. And she said she's seen it in the corner of her eye, and she's seen it kind of like it turned towards her. And when she looked, she said it disappeared. She goes, it was gone. She goes, either it ducked down really fast or it disappeared. And so I'm like, babe, our fence is like 7 or 8 foot tall. It's a tall fence. I'm like, and I'm like, I can't even look over if I jump. If I jump, I can't see through the other, because it's so tall. So whatever it was showed itself in the middle of the daytime, and it was able to peek over a 7-8 foot tall fence, and so I'm like, what the heck? This is still freaking happening, like this is still going on, and I'm just getting blown away. And the last encounter that we had here at this house was 2 months ago or so, when I actually had to call the Fish and Game, because it was getting intense. Because who you gonna call, bro? When this stuff happens, you're gonna call the police and say, hey, there's a werewolf that's outside. It's coming from the canyon, So, like, what do you say? So what happened was, the canyon rim is just, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful area. And there's houses right there. There's houses all around. And I don't want people to think, people to think whatever they want. I don't have time to make up stories or anything like that. This is like what happens to me and what has happened. And the canyon rim is a beautiful area. Every families go walking there, they go jogging, they go biking. And so we often go biking in the canyon, and on the canyon rim in the daytime, there's people down there and stuff. It's just beautiful. And so me and my daughter are going, just her and I, and she's in front of me on her bike. And the canyon trail rim by my house, it has like a downward grade. And so for me, like having her behind me, if something happened, if she fell or something happened, or, there's a lot of crazy people in this world. If something happened, she'd be behind me uphill. And so I'd have to ride up there or get off and run uphill. So I told her to get in front of me. If something happens, if you fall or, I can see you and I'll be coming towards you. So she's about 20 feet in front of me, and we're going down this grade. And before we go on we turn that corner to hit that canyon rim, there's a house right there, and it doesn't have a backyard. Well, it has a backyard, but it's not fenced. It's open, and it literally, you can just walk to the canyon from that back door, really, really creepy. But they have a German Shepherd there, and it's a little pup. It's like, I don't know, I'd say maybe a year old. It doesn't look fully grown. And it always has one of his ears is kind of dangled down, like kind of goofy looking, really cute dog. It's never barked at us. We've gone there so many times. It's never barked. It's never growled. As a matter of fact, it picks up his toy and looks at us like he wants us to play with them. But, we don't know who they are or know the dogs, so we don't do that. But this dog, when we turned the corner, it was barking. And I remember after what I'm about to tell you guys, I was like, oh, this dog was barking. I'm like, he never barks. But he was looking in this general location. And at that moment, I'm like, oh, there's rock chucks there. There's raccoons. There's deer. Often we have like groups of deer that come down my street. They go in and out of the canyon. And so there's a lot of wildlife. So he's barking. And at the moment, I didn't think it, I didn't really put it all together. So my daughter, we're going, she's in front of me. And all of a sudden, dude, she just jumps off her bike, rolls. And on the side of this little trail, there's goat heads and, thorns and stuff. She rolled into the goat heads and took off running towards the houses, yelling, "It's there, it's there!" And I'm like, and I'm already going fast. And right when I get to where she was at, I hear the rustling in the bush on the left of us, because the canyon's on the left side, and all I see is black fur. I see black fur down in all those trees and those bushes. That's all I could make out. And then it just went down, like it just went all the way to where you couldn't see it anymore, like blended in or whatever. And so I jump off my bike and I'm running backwards looking at that area, and my daughter's all the way over there close to where that dog is at. And I asked her, I'm like, what happened? And we're backing up. She's like, there was something there. She goes, she said it was black. She goes, she said it was a bear. She goes, it was a bear right there. She goes, it was looking at me. She was like, it looked like it wanted to grab me. And then it seen you and it ran in the bushes. And I'm like, a bear? I'm like, it looked like a bear. She goes, it was big, black, and it had pointy ears like a bear and the mouth like a bear. And so, and she goes, I'm like, what? And I know what's going on, right? And so I'm digging her brain. I'm like, what it look like? What it look like? And she's like, it had a big neck, like a mat. She goes, it had a really big neck. And I'm like, was it standing, sitting? She goes, I don't know. It was really fast. And she's 8 years old. So I'm digging her brain. She says that the neck was massive. In my mind, I like a mane, because I've heard encounters where these things look almost like they have a mane or like a sticker around the neck or something. And that's what she said. So we left our bikes there. I called. Like I said, what are you going to do? Are you going to call? I already know my worst fear of what it is. And, and so you're not going to call the police, bro, and say, like, there's a werewolf that, stalking us in the canyon, So what I do is I call the Fish and Game and I tell them, hey, you know what? My daughter saw a black bear right here on the canyon rim. And they came rushing. And we walked to my house and they came to my house. And they're like, okay, show us where this location's at. And they have rifles and dart guns, all this tranquilizer guns. And so they come out and I show them where it's at. And they don't go in the bush. They don't go in there. They're just looking. And the guy tells me, he's like, hey, have you had any reports of big black dogs around? Have you from the neighbors or anything? I'm like, no, not that I know of. I'm like, I didn't say anything about a black dog. And he goes, well, maybe it was a Labrador or something that your daughter saw. I'm like, she said it looked like a bear, man. It had the pointy ears like a bear, a black bear. And he's like, all right. So he doesn't go in there, but they got their weapons drawn, right? And I'm freaked out. And they said something that was kind of made me think about it, because they said, well, he goes, whatever it was, it knew not to leave tracks. And I'm like, what? He goes, well, I mean, there's no mud. There's no mud there. There's no dirt. He goes, there's no where he went down, where it went down, there's no fur left, like it wouldn't snag on anything. He goes, and it sounded like he was saying it was intelligent and it knew when and where to do it, not to leave any evidence. And so I'm freaking out, and he's like, well, you know what, we're gonna talk to our superiors, and we can't put traps down here in this area, but we're gonna see what we're gonna do about this. And he goes, in the meantime, he goes, don't come out here at night. He goes, if you do, come in a large group with flashlights, and if you come in the day, come in groups and make lots of noises. And so my mind is like, I already know what this is. And thinking about that, I felt really bad because for my daughter, for what happened, but a couple about a week prior to that, she came running inside. She was in the front yard playing. Her and her little sister, they do their scooters on the front of the house on their sidewalk and stuff. She says that she saw a big bear run across down the street. Like, again, my house, I walk out the front door, I look to the left, there's, the street goes down and there's the canyon. She said that she saw a bear run from this side of the street, zip across to the other side of the street towards the canyon. And I'm like, well, I don't know. I don't know if that was a bear, baby. Maybe it was just a big, one of those big dogs or something, or a horse. I go, hey, she goes, he was huge. I go, maybe it was a horse. There's a pasture down the street where they have beautiful horses. Like maybe one of the horses was, and she's like, no, Dad, she looked like a bear. And I'm like, on four legs? She was, yeah, I was running like a bear on four legs. And I'm like, okay. So we got in our car and it was daytime and we just drive around the area. We didn't see any horses. We didn't see anything. And I kind of dismissed it. And I said, maybe it was just a dog or something, babe. And she's like, it looked like a bear. And then 2 weeks later, around there, 2 weeks later is when it showed itself to her. And so I felt really bad because she's like, see, Dad, I told you I saw that bear running across the road. So when that happened, that was the last encounter we had. And me being a man of faith, I'm always like, there's something spiritual about stuff. Like especially when it's predatory, when something likes to terrorize people and kids and stuff like that, that's predatory to me. Like it's like a demonic kind of a thing. So what I did was, I went and grabbed my plum tree in the backyard. I broke off some twigs. Me and my wife and my two girls, we made crosses out of them. We yarned them together, and I blessed them with anointing oil, and then we buried them in the four corners of our property, and we basically blessed our property and our home, and gave a hedge of protection. And we haven't had an encounter here since that happened, And the last thing that kind of strange that happened here at my house, it wasn't here at my house, just these kids here on the 4th of July were popping fireworks, and these kids came down. We got to meet them. They live on the other side of the street, and they're little kids, maybe 9 to 14. There's 3 of them, and we just start talking, and it's already dark when we're doing the fireworks, And so I walk them down the street to get back to their house. And I'm like, you guys, you shouldn't be walking at night here, man. You least in groups like this, but always try to be home before dark. And he goes, why? One of the kids goes, why? I go, well, there's animals in the canyon. There could be a mountain lion, with all the COVID stuff going on, Kimberly, which is, the town that connects the Twin Falls. There was a cougar in the middle of town, and it was in somebody's backyard. It came down from the Sawtooth Mountains, which, like I said, is not far from us at all. It's just, a quick drive. But they euthanized it. They had to kill it. So I'm telling them, you see all these animals coming from the mountains and stuff, man. I'm like, it could be dangerous. And he tells me, he goes, I saw something in the canyon one night, and they're all testifying. I'm like, well, what did you see? He goes, it was a big black figure, and it had horns on his head. And he goes, it was staying in that dark where the trees cover that canopy. He said it was staying in that dark, and it had horns, and it was on, it was like a giant person. And my mind was like, man, I don't think I knew those weren't horns. Those are ears. I figured those were ears that he saw, but they seen them. They were throwing rocks on the canyon rim, and then, they were throwing rocks and having fun doing things what kids do. And that's when they saw this black figure come out of the canopy, and it had horns, and they all ran off, and their parents didn't believe them. But I know now what that was. So that's the stuff the last things that have happened here at my house since I've blessed the property and all that. Yeah, so that was the last thing that happened here. And now that I'm putting all these things together, researching and all that. I lived in Hays County in Texas, where it's a hot spot for Dogman and Bigfoot and different types of Bigfoot. See, I didn't even know there was different types of Bigfoot. I just thought it was like the patty. I remember seeing that, and I was just ecstatic to see that as a kid. And so I was a believer at a very young age. And over there in Texas, my family, they lived in Michigan. The story I'm about to tell you is from my Uncle Roy, who was born in Michigan. And at this time, we're living in Texas, in Hays County, really swampy area. But he tells me that he was a teenager and they were driving on one of these back roads. And as they're driving on one of these back roads, they pull over to the side and they're getting high. They're like smoking weed. They're teenagers, right? So they're smoking weed. They got their windows down. They're laughing, having a good time. They got music on, and he says he was in the passenger side with his window down, and there's these bushes and reeds right like next to his window, and he says that they all heard something moving in the bushes next to their car, so they turned the music down, and they could hear it, and he says right where his window was at, two hands parted their reeds, and he says a Bigfoot looked in the window, and he says he looked at all of them like it was sizing them up. It looked at my uncle first, locked eyes with him, looked at the driver, and looked at the people in the back, and then it looked back at my uncle, and it just kind of moved his hands, and the reeds came back, and it walked off, and nobody believed them because they were getting high. But that's what he says that happened to him, and he was like 14 years old or so, and he said it was the ugliest thing he's ever seen in his life. Like, he was traumatized from it for a long time. He said it had a nasty scar on his face too, and but it was like a foot. Its face was a foot away from his face. That this creature opened the reeds, and it happened to be right where his window was out open, and it bent down and looked at all of them, and they got the feeling that it was sizing them up, like trying to decide what to do, and then it just walked away. And so I think about that, and I'm like, man, so as a little kid, I'm like, yeah, I believed in them. And then, live in that same area, me as a kid, as he telling me these stories, I was probably about 9 years old when this happened. I'm sleeping, I have a friend who comes over, and we're watching scary movies at night, and we were sitting in the living room in one of those beds or those couches that turn into a bed, and we're watching movies, eating snacks and stuff. And my grandpa's bedroom is right next to the living room. And so my grandpa was a very paranoid man, or he was a very paranoid man. He'd often have guard dogs, and he would have these high fences and spotlights everywhere, a big old barred gate that locked our property, and big old metal doors that looked like prison doors. We always said on the exits and the entrances of our house. Well, we're watching this scary movie, me and my friend, and we hear a creak, like creaking on the patio, on the porch. And we both look, and there's nothing there. And we're scared. We're like, we're laughing, like, oh man, these movies are getting to us. And then I'm like digging through my snacks, and we hear the creak again. Now, I don't look this time, but he looks, and he screams bloody murder, bro. He starts freaking out, and I look, and there's nothing there. And my grandpa comes running out already with the shotgun, and he's like, what's going on? And he's like, what the hell's going on? And my friend says a baboon looked through the window, through the porch. And my grandpa didn't even waste time. He didn't question him. He goes out there, and the shotgun's ready. He opens the door, and he goes out, and he sweeps the whole property, looks everywhere. There was nothing there. And he comes back in, and he's like, maybe you're just freaking out because of the movie, man. And that's what I thought, too. I'm like, a baboon? I was like, what? I'm like, you saw a baboon look through the window? I'm like, yeah, you're hyping yourself up from this movie, But he swore that it was this thing that looked like a baboon that looked through the window, And so thinking about those encounters I had, and my uncle's encounter, living in Texas, and then coming here in Idaho and having that whole Dogman thing. And I never heard of the word Dogman. My grandma and my uncles called it the Wolfman or the werewolf. Like I said, my uncle who had the encounter was born in Michigan. My grandma, I still have family in Michigan. It's around the Saginaw area. I don't even know what part of Michigan it is, but I know it's Saginaw is where they're from, and they lived on the like in the country. And my grandma would tell me stories when I was a kid, because I remember like watching the werewolf movies, The Howling and stuff, and she would tell me, and I always thought she was just trying to scare me, but she was dead serious. She goes, the Wolfman is real. And she had my attention, and she goes, yeah. She goes, when we lived in Michigan, the Wolfman would eat the homeless people. Like, there were homeless people would come up missing, and they would find their bloody clothes and stuff thrown out and on the outskirts of town in the woods and stuff. And she says that they love to hang around the train tracks because the homeless people would come, they would hitch rides on the trains, and they'd get off and they, for whatever reason, and it would prey on them. And she was serious, and she didn't call it Dogman. That, she called it the Wolfman, and she said werewolf, that they're real. And so that was so intriguing to me. I'm like, wow, the werewolf is real. It could be real. And so coming, like I said, going back and forth and examining all this stuff in my life. And another creepy story is in that same area, Hayes County, my aunt had a boyfriend who's this Mexican guy, and he didn't speak any English. And over there, I had this dog, a pit bull. His name was Diablo, which is Spanish for devil. And he was, there's a lot of dog fighting over there. I don't know if there still is, but it was really big back then when I was probably around 13 or 14 at this time. And basically this dog won his freedom from these people who used to fight dogs. And I don't condone fighting dogs at all. But I remember, like, he basically won his freedom because he was so savage and mean, and he was just ruthless. They would breed these pit bull. After he won his freedom, they would keep him on this pit bull farm, and they would breed the dogs in the middle of the property, and they would have a guard dog that will circle and protect the whole property. And that dog was Diablo. And I remember walking by this pit bull farm. It's not really a farm. It's just they had a lot of dogs, and they bred them, and everybody knew it was for fighting. But we would see a bloody, ripped up pair of pants on the fence. We'd see a bloody shoe over here because people were always trying to steal this guy's dogs because they were really prized dogs, really expensive dogs, and people were trying to steal them. So Diablo was the security, and so he won his freedom. And then after years of doing security, my grandpa was friends with, some way or somehow I ended up with this dog, and I love this dog. He was so mean. He was mean, but he was gnarly looking. He was so cool. Had these scars on his faces with the cropped ears, big old head, muscles, and I couldn't even barely pet him because he was so mean. And when I would feed him, I just have to slide his bowl to him. And my grandpa kept him chained in the front, right by our gate. Well, my aunt's boyfriend, who's this Mexican guy, he looks at me and he goes, "Your dog is a punk." And he tells me in Spanish. And I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "This dog is savage, man. Like, he'll eat you alive." And he goes, "He's a punk." And I'm like, and he goes, "Watch." And he starts to get close to him. And then my dog starts barking. I'm like, "Bro, if you get close," I'm like, "you're on your own, man. I warned you." And he gets down, man, and he looks at my dog, and he just, like, he has this 2-second stare down with him. And this freaking savage dog rolled on his back and started to pee and was whimpering at this guy. And I'm like, "What in the heck?" Everybody there was like, "Oh," making fun of me, like, "Oh, he punked your dog out, this and that." And the guy comes up to me, and I'm like, "I can't believe you just did that." And he tells me that when he was in the desert walking at night in Hayes County, that he's seen a dog walking on 2 legs. He told me, I think he said coyote. He said he thinks it was a coyote, a coyote in Spanish. It walking on 2 legs. It was all black, and it spoke to him in Spanish. And I guess they had a brief conversation in Spanish, dude, with this thing on 2 legs that looked like a dog or a coyote. And he says ever since that happened, that he's been able to have a weird connection with dogs and, like, speak to them in a way that nobody else, that he couldn't before. And so that happened. And then thinking about, I dismissed all these things, like, until I had my encounter here in Idaho. And then I'm like, oh snap, maybe those things really did happen. Maybe my friend did see a type of a Bigfoot, like, then, because I started researching the Beast of 7 Shoots, where they have, like, that snout, like a, different type of Sasquatch. So I'm like, man, maybe it was one of those that he saw. And then the Dogman thing with, walking on 2 legs and talking, like the whole spiritual side of it, like something demonic where they're talking, and it either gives them some kind of gift or curse or something. And And so that's the story. The stories over there, and kind of what really opened me up to, like, kind of relit that flame for Bigfoot, was I had a strange encounter in Stanley, Idaho. It's around Lake Redfish. Again, guys, those of you guys who, this area is just, I mean, there's hidden lakes, crystal lakes. There's giant peaks, giant mountains full of pine trees. I mean, it's just a beautiful area. I mean, it's really rugged and beautiful. But this is my first time really camping, like in a tent. I guess not. I mean, I've camped in a tent before, but never like up in these mountains by these hidden lakes and stuff, you know. So it's me, my wife, and my first daughter is born. You know, she's about, I think she's got to be like 2 years old. So my other daughter wasn't born yet. And we took my two nieces. My nieces at that time were maybe like 9 and 11. And so we go up there to Stanley, and we've never done that before. So we go to the ranger station to get a map of the campsites and all that. And we go there, and the ranger, as he's giving me the map and telling me about the area, and I'm asking him questions about bears, you know, me being the kind of like this little bit of a city slicker thing going on. I'm like, is there bears out here? Like, what do we got to do? And he's, you know, giving us the rundown, you know, don't put your food by your tent, you know, keep it up or make sure it's secure, and, you know, just different things like that. And he leans in and tells me in a low voice, he goes, there's been a camera crew out here looking for Bigfoot. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, it came out of nowhere. And I lean in, and I'm like, I'm thinking that's freaking awesome. He goes, there's been a lot of sightings here in the campsites of him taking coolers and messing around with people at night. And I'm like, are you serious? That's freaking amazing. So he shows me the general area, and I mean, it's vast. Again, this area is vast. And he says they were out there like days before, but they were gone. And so I go and I pick a spot, and, you know, hoping like, man, what if I do see Bigfoot or whatever here in, you know, the Idaho mountains and all that. And so we get our campsite where we pitch 2 tents, one for me, my wife, and my daughter, and the other tent is for my nieces. And we're about 5 to maybe 10 foot apart, you know, in our tents. And so that first night, deer would come around, and lots of deer, and they would even there would be little ones with them, and we could hand feed them marshmallows. It was so cool. My daughter loved it, my wife, my nieces, I loved it. It was so cute to see these deers come up and eat a marshmallow from your hand. And so there'd be like 6 of them walking through that whole area in our campsite, and they would even lay down and just hang out with us. They weren't afraid of us or nothing. It was pretty cool. And, you know, we had all the birds, all the wildlife. It was just the forest alive. And so the next day, because we got there close to the evening, so the next day we wake up, we have breakfast and all that, and we go for a hike. And we're going out for the hike, and I grab a stick. And I'm like, I've seen them do this on the Bigfoot shows, Bev. They grab the stick and they hit it against a tree, right? And supposedly a Bigfoot's supposed to reply to you. And my wife's like, you're a dork, you know, whatever. So I do it. I grab this stick and I bashed it 3 times on this tree. And sure enough, we got a reply. Came from way out. I mean, in this valley, like it sounded like it was really far away, but we heard it. And I know it wasn't an echo because I heard the echo of it. And then it was like a pause, and then we heard the reply. And so we were freaking out, and we were like laughing, like it was having a good time, you know, just having fun with it. And then I'm like, okay, now I'm going to do a yell, because I've seen them do this too. And so I do a yell, the loudest yell I can. I just scream it through the mountains. And sorry, I was just getting a drink of water. I do this yell through this mountain, and it goes through the valley, and we're waiting, and like we wait like just a few seconds, and we're like, oh, that was fun. There's nothing. And then all of a sudden, dude, this yell comes back, bellows through the valley, dude. I mean, it's just loud, and I couldn't even do that, you know, if I if I tried, like if I had a loudspeaker almost. It sounded so massive, and it came from so far away. It sounded to me like it came from so far away, but being so loud. It was really, and it scared us. And my wife was like, "Okay, stop messing around, Chewy." She's like, "That's enough," you know. And the kids are like excited and scared. I'm excited and scared. I'm like, dude, I think that's a Bigfoot out there, because the ranger told us he's been around, you know. And so we go back to our tent, we finish up, or to our campsite, finish up our day. And then that night, as the evening comes, there's no deer. We're waiting for the deer. We got our marshmallows, we're set up, you know, we're waiting to have, you know, another night with these beautiful deer. There's no deer that night, like there's none. And then I really distinctly remember not hearing the birds or anything, because even at night when it starts to get dark, the birds, you can still hear the birds over there, and there was nothing. It was really quiet, and I didn't think like had something to do with the creature. I just was like, that's weird, like there's nothing here. I was like, oh well, it's wildlife. They're here one day, they're at the next place or whatever, you know, maybe they're down the other side of the mountain or whatever. And so we call it a night. I get in my tent, well, my wife and my daughter, my nieces get in theirs, and we go to sleep. And I'm awoken, and I don't even know what time it was, but I was awoken by this big ass growl. And I say a big ass growl because it was next to me, dude. It was between me, my tent, and my niece's tent, right there. And this growl, like, it woke it. I'm trying to get words for it. Like, I felt it. Like, it was so deep, and like I felt it, and it woke me up. And when I woke up, my wife, as soon as I woke up, she whispered, "Did you hear that?" She goes, "Did you hear that?" And she's whispering, I'm like, "I heard it." And then she goes, "Did you fart?" She goes, "It smells so nasty." And then my mind, I'm like, that's the Bigfoot. I'm like, I hear, you know, they're stinky, they're musky, all that stuff, and their growls are really powerful. And so I'm whispering this, and we're like really quiet. And so what I do, it's like, I just want to see this thing, because I'm like, man, I want confirmation that I'm not going crazy. So we don't hear anything. Whatever it is between our tents, and because we heard the growl and we could smell it. So I got my flashlight and I grabbed the pistol. You know, I wasn't trying to, you know, I'm not a person who, if I see a Bigfoot, I'm going to shoot him. That's not what today I wouldn't even do that, you know. But it was just in case it was a bear or whatever, you know, in case things went south. I had a 45, so I unzipped it. I started to unzip it really, really quietly, and then I unzipped it really fast, and I dove out like a Rambo. I did my Rambo, and I started sweeping the area with the flashlight. Dude, there was nothing there. And I was like, I was trying to muster up courage to go, because it's black, it's dark. I went and looked on the other side of the tent. There was nothing there. And again, trees are I mean, you're in the middle of all these huge trees. So my mind is like, I'm like, either we're hallucinating, or it either ran away so fast, or it blended in and hid behind a tree where I couldn't see it, because it wasn't there. But we heard the growl, and we smelt it. So I went and grabbed my nieces, and we slept in one tent that night. So that was in 2012 when that reignited like my whole cryptid thing with the Bigfoot, because I believe that was Bigfoot out there that night. And you know, either he was really creepy, like how is it that I did that yell that day, and how he knew that it was me in that tent. My mind started getting really weird. I'm like, that's weird. He could have gone to the other side, you know, over there, you know, on the other part of this hilly or this mountain, and been harassing people over there, you know, or whatever. It's like, but he knew where I was at. So that kind of freaked me out. And so that was my encounter in Stanley. And that was all the stuff that's been kind of my cryptid, I guess you should say, encounters in Texas and here in Idaho. And yeah, so that's kind of what happened with the cryptid side of all this. And as you know, Josh, I've talked to you about all the other weird weird stuff. But before I go on to other stuff, I just thought about this. My buddy Raymond, and I'm not going to give too much of his stories, but he's got some stories, man, that are like, what? Are you kidding me? Just to give you guys an example, his dad has been harassed by this thing that he calls a whistling bear that walks on two legs. And it's here, and his dad is from Kimberly, where I said the mountain lion was euthanized. That's where his dad's from. And his dad, had an encounter with the whistling bear, and it followed him. Weird stuff happened with that. There's the hairy man of Birch Creek, which is not too far from us. And south of us is the South Hills, where you have, the Smoky Mountains and Magic Mountain ski resorts and all that. There's the hairy man of the woods up there. And that encounter is, and I've heard this one, and I've researched this one too, where this guy is by himself and he's cutting his wood, getting a cord of wood out there with his chainsaw. And he says he sees a Bigfoot out there, but the Bigfoot looks old. Like he says he was walking like an old man, really slow, like he was in pain. And he put his hand up and he rested on a tree and stared at him. And they locked eyes. And he didn't even care about the guy chainsawing. He just looked at him and went back on his way, walking like an old man. And so he's been dubbed the old man of the forest or whatever. So that one is pretty intense, and which is because we go up there all the time in that area to go camping and stuff too. And on the Dogman part of this, when they say the more you know, the worse off you are, because I was like, didn't know about any of the Dogman stuff or different types of Bigfoot or how creepy or how violent they could be. I just thought it was Patty. I'm like, oh, it's Patty. She's a sweet Bigfoot, minding her own business, trying to get away from people. Then I started hearing all these encounters of baboon-looking ones, gugways, all these different creatures that are violent, that, that weird things happen. And so researching the Dogman stuff, there was in Hanson, Idaho, which is next to Kimberly. It's connected to Kimberly. There's a Dogman encounter over there where the guy, the son is rabbit hunting with his friends. And here in Idaho and there's a lot of rabbits in southern Idaho. So, you get in a pickup truck, and everybody has a truck in Idaho. You get a shotgun or 22 and you go up and you get on the back of these trucks and you just go up off the road and go up into the hills and stuff, and you spotlight rabbits and you shoot them. And they use them for dog food. They use them for fur, all these different for sport. And so he's hunting, and he gets out of the truck, and these rabbits they go off running. He has his spotlight and his gun in his hand, and he goes running, and he says he thought it was a bird, an owl, because it looked like it was something hovering over, like with his arms or wings spread out, looking down and eating a rabbit or something. And then he got close, and he goes, it wasn't feathers, it was fur. And he says it was this. He was telling his dad this story. He's like, Dad, we were at rabbit hunting. I seen one of those Bigfoots we're always making fun of you about. And his dad's like, you saw one? He goes, well, tell me. And his dad goes on to tell him about rabbit hunting. And his dad's like, well, describe it for me. He goes, well, it stood up, and his arms were way long. Like it was the longest arms I've ever seen. And he goes, and it had a snout and had two pointy ears. And he goes, and when it looked at us, it ran on four legs. And he says, and it jumped over this rock pile on two legs. It was running on fours, and then it got up and jumped like a man over the rock pile and kept running. And they said when they saw it stand up like a man and jump that huge distance, they loaded up and they got out of there. And his dad tells him that wasn't Bigfoot, that was a Dogman that you saw, And there's ones in Stanley also where I had my Bigfoot encounter of Dogmen out there, of people driving and seeing eye shine in the trees, the famous amber, take a Corona bottle in the sun, and that's what the eyes look like. And people are posting signs over there of saying monsters beware, like don't come into these wood, like this is off limits. And they'll put a drawing of what looks like a werewolf. And so I've heard of encounters over there in Stanley with that, and I think about my area, and just so everybody knows, again, the canyon is the deepest gorge in America. Excuse me, just grabbing some water. The deepest gorge in America and the largest lava cave system in the world is here in Twin Falls, and people say the canyon has caves, and I believe I sent you pictures of this cave in the canyon, and it's hidden behind this tree. So in the summertime or when it's just, you can't really see it. And when it's weird because I've passed there so many times, and one day I noticed it. I'm like, whoa, there's this cave, and people say it connects to this canyon. The caves and canyon connect, and it's just like a labyrinth down there. And what's really interesting too, going back to our area, those of you who are listening who know about the missing 411 with David Pilates, I didn't know about any of this until I started researching from the thing on my roof. But the first film that was recorded was an hour and a half from my house. With that show was filmed in Pocatello, Idaho Falls area, which is an hour and a half from my house, and I had no idea about this stuff. Like I said, the more you know, the worse you are off. And so I'm freaking out. I'm like, dude, there's hot spots all around me. I'm like, kids are coming up missing, all weird stuff. I have living in Gooding, which is about not too far from where I'm at now, maybe about 45-minute drive or so, 30-minute drive. My mom had a boyfriend, and his nephew, his name is Ruben, and he's still on Missing and Exploited Children of Idaho. You look on the website. I forget, I think his last name's Morales. Ruben Morales. He was like a 2-year-old kid who came up missing, and they never found him. And their family lived on this ranch outside of Gooding. And when this kid came up missing, they had all the law enforcement come, search and rescue. They searched for weeks for this kid. They could not find him. And the weird thing is that the dogs tracked the smell all the way from the house across the field, through an old abandoned stockyard, and then across these railroad tracks and another field, and disappeared at the river. And they assumed that he fell in the river and he died, but they never found his body, so he's still on that missing thing. But the thing is that they didn't say in the news or in the paper that distance that they tracked this little kid was probably 2.5 miles or something crazy. And he's like 2 years old, and the amount of time it took for him to get there, go through that distance, and how quick he did it, it just doesn't add up, bro. It was something weird happened over there to that little kid. And like I said, with all the missing 411 stuff, it gets really trippy because a lot of people come up missing here in Idaho. And going back to the canyon by my street, man, I was telling my wife, I'm like, babe, if I would have known all this stuff, like, I don't know if I would have bought a house here by the canyon. I would have picked it somewhere else, just joking around. But I love my home, and we're not going anywhere. But here in the canyon, we found, after these things happen, we go in the daytime. Like, I'm going to share another story with you guys here in a bit, which is really, really intense in the canyon. But me and Raymond, we meet up on Fridays for our lunch break, and we walk down around from 12 to 1 in the canyon, and we just, go talk cryptid stuff. We look for tracks, different things. And we found a track that was like a canine track that was as big as my hand, dude. And I got a picture of it, and you can post that one up too if you want, Josh. But it's following these deer tracks. It's following these deer tracks into the trees. But this canine print is massive. I don't know what it is, but Raymond says that he had Saint Bernard, and those paw prints were way bigger than the Saint Bernard. And Saint Bernard is a big dog. And then also down there, you can put this picture up as well. It's with a Bigfoot print, and you can't see the toes, but I put my foot next to it, and this is where nobody really should be. It took a lot for us to get there, crawling on our hands and knees at times, going through the foliage, and if you push through it, it opens up like an umbrella, and it's just amazing. Like I said, it's like The Hobbit or the Lord of the Rings down there. It's just amazing. And we got lost several times down there. So those of you guys who know this location and you know what I'm talking about, I live right on the rim, and I know this place like the back of my hand, and I get lost, and we both get lost when you shouldn't. So weird. So I don't recommend people like going that or don't know the area. Like, don't even try it. Just go and stick to the trail. Follow the trail, and the trail will take you out. But I found this Bigfoot print, and it had to have been, dude, like 18 inches long and 8 inches wide. Huge. And the impression in the dirt, it was like a mix between rock, dirt, and sand and mud. It's on the riverbed. And I mean, the weight of this thing, it was massive, dude. So I put my foot next to it and I took a picture, and my foot looks like a little toddler's foot compared to this thing. And then I moved my foot and I barely made an indentation, dude. And whatever it was, I mean, it was big and heavy. And so that was just to give you guys an idea. This is just down the street from my house, by the way. And another time we went down there, we found, this is really freaky. This goes into the whole missing 411 stuff. We found a shredded up tent down there, a campsite destroyed. You're not supposed to camp down here in this canyon. It's not allowed, but people do it anyway, but we're walking, on our lunch break, and all of a sudden there's this tent, and I sent Josh those pictures too. You can put those up if you want so people can get an idea of what I'm talking about. But this campsite is destroyed. All this person's possessions are thrown around, and the tent is just like somebody just picked it up and like either cut it or something that threw it on top of the trees. And what's really alarming is there's one empty bullet casing right there, bro. And there's no bodies, there's nothing, like nobody's there. So we're thinking like, and what's weird is we go the next day and it's all gone. Like somebody cleaned it up. Like you can't even tell anything happened there. But we assume, and just the whole, like I said, missing 411, people getting taken and all that. Whatever happened to this guy or this girl that was camping out there, they had a rude awakening, and all they had was time to get one shot off. One shot, and the person is not there. Like either he was taken, she was taken, there was no blood. So whatever this person shot at, the bullet didn't do anything to it, or they missed. And so weird things like that. And so we've gone, I mean, it's like a maze down there, dude. Like you guys go, people who know my area, it's really beautiful, but stick to the trail. So, but we go off the trail, Raymond and I, and this time we take one of our friends from our church, one of our youth leaders, and he's from the Mojave Desert. And he's lived here for like 10 years, 15 years already. But in the Mojave Desert, his dad was part of he was in the cult, did a lot of dark magic. And so I knew that about him, like that his dad was in that, but he's this kid is he's a man now. He's a Christian man. He's one of our youth leaders, but his dad is part of the cult, still is in California, in the Mojave Desert. But we're walking back there, and it's just strange. And we find a shirt thrown in the tree. We even found a baby carriage, like a stroller, thrown way up into the tree, like 20 foot up there. And it's like, and it's a place where nobody should be. There's no way you can get through there pushing a baby, dude. It's like, what the heck is going on? It's weird. And then we're walking in, and so my friend, his name is Jonathan, he sees, we see shoes, random shoes thrown on the ground, children's shoes, deep to where there should be nobody at. And he freaked out, and he looked at me, he says, he got a bad feeling. He goes, hey man, Chewy, something dark is happening down here. Something dark is happening, man. I go, what do you mean, bro? He goes, see these shoes? They're all left shoes to children. And he says in California that his dad, that was part of the cult, they would do sacrifices. I mean, dark stuff. He never witnessed it himself, but he knew and he assumed that his dad was doing these things. But he says that they would find piles of left shoes to children. And then none of the right, only the left. And there would be piles of them, or they would be thrown out in random places where they would do these seances and conjuring up who knows what. And so he brought that to my attention, that there was some satanic stuff going on down there. And so that gives you an idea of what happens here in the canyon. And this is kind of, I'm leading into what happened on Halloween night. Something really crazy happened on Halloween night. And I'm leading up with all the, the paranormal part of it. But where I said the hairy man of the woods, around Magic Mountain, there's a lake called Lake Cleveland up there. It's in Declo and Malta area, and you guys can Google it. It's beautiful. It's this, it's like probably 4,000 elevation, maybe. It's high up there. But on the top of this mountain, there's a lake. It's like an old volcano, I guess, and there's a beautiful lake surrounded by pine trees and stuff. So we go there every year, and we just got back a couple weeks ago. We went camping for my birthday up there. But 2 years ago, we were up there camping, and there was nobody else there. There's like this loop. There's like the camping area. There's a loop. You have one campsite for a tent or RV, and go down a little more. There's another one, and it makes a loop, right? And you just pick your site that you want to be at. Well, this time there was nobody there. It was just me, my wife, and my two daughters. So where there was nobody there, right? And probably around midnight or so, me and my wife are staying up late. Kids are already in the tent, crashed out. We have the fire going. We're drinking a beer. Just having a good time, talking and enjoying the stars, watching shooting stars and stuff. It's amazing up there. But all of a sudden, a fire starts down on a few other campsites away from us, and on the fire pit, it looked like the fire pit lit up. And so I'm like, babe, nobody drove up here, right? She's like, no, nobody did. I'm like, well, there's somebody there. You see it, right? She's like, yeah, it's a fire. And we were looking, and you could kind of like distinctly see people, right? And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Maybe they just got dropped off. And I'm like, no, we stayed in this area the whole time. Nobody drove up here. And then I started thinking again. I'm like, wait a minute, we're like 4,000 or 5,000 feet elevation. I'm like, how you'd have to hike up here, and that's gonna take you forever. And then the terrain is crazy. I'm like, or unless somebody lives out here. I'm just all these scenarios, and I'm like, oh, whatever, And then so we go to call it a night. We get in our tent, and like 5 minutes of us settling in, I hear a goat. And let me grab a drink of water real quick. So I hear this goat, and my wife, I tell her, babe, I heard a goat. She goes, it's a deer, Chewy, it's a deer. And I'm like, no, I know what deer sound like. We've heard them before. I'm like, I've heard goats. My grandpa had chivos. In Spanish, we call them chivos. I've heard goats before. That was a goat. And we're going back and forth. She's like, it was a deer. Good night, Chewy. And I'm like, all right. I'm like, good night. So we go to sleep. And of course, we're always packing. There's always like some kind of Glock or something we keep, just for protection. So we have that, and then we wake up in the morning and we have breakfast, and I look and there's nobody over there, no vehicles, no people or anything. And so me and my oldest daughter, Davina, we go walking up there, and dude, there was a pentagram up there with animal bones right there, like they were doing seances and sacrifices right there, bro. And I knew it. I'm like, I knew I heard a goat. I knew that something sketchy was going on. Why these people didn't drive up here? They like walked up here or something, like or living here or something weird. But I know I heard a goat, and there was a pentagram with animal bones, dude. And so that gives you the idea of the things that happen here. And again, I live in the Magic Valley. There's a lot of what I would say magical stuff that happens, spiritual stuff that happens in this area. And so going back to the canyon, what I'm leading up to, my friend Raymond, he's a Christian man. He's been a pastor for many years. Now he's been doing full-time working as a federal investigator for several years. But back in his younger days, he was a pastor, a missionary. He traveled the world. He's gone to every continent. But he tells me stories. He was telling me how he has destroyed altars, dark altars for dark satanic rituals here in the canyon. And back in, because he lived in Washington, also he's destroyed altars over there in Washington, and so he's got some crazy stories on the supernatural stuff. But he's telling me these things, and he comes up to me and he goes, "Hey, I know we had a bad night or the bad day when that Dogman followed you home." He goes, "But you want to go see if we can disrupt some devil worshippers, or go disrupt some." Try to see if we can disrupt people from hurting kids, or what if there, it was a Halloween night last year. He goes, there's going to be some seances. There's going to be some weird stuff going on in the canyon. He goes, I know it. He goes, I've seen it there before. I've destroyed altars down there before. And us finding all those women's shoes, those children's shoes, the baby stroller, the clothes. So we were thinking like, man, these guys are they like doing human sacrifices or what? So we go down there, me being a pastor, I'm mainly a youth pastor, and, I have a heart for kids. I have a big heart for kids. And so anything or anybody that preys on a kid, man, there's a lot of things I could forgive people of, but I can, I don't put up with that crap at all, man. So we're thinking about all the little kids' shoes and the baby strollers and stuff, and all the dark stuff that happens. And we're like, you know what? I bet you there's going to be something sketchy going on Halloween night. I'm like, let's do it. So he tells me, he goes, I'm going to go. He goes, we're going to call him Young Atlas, but he works for the Idaho Fish and Game, or he did at that time. He doesn't work there anymore. But at that time, he worked for the Idaho Fish and Game. And so he's like, I'm bringing him with us. I'm like, all right, let's do it. And so what we do is like, well, what is our plan tonight, bro? Like, what are we doing? And we're like, okay, hopefully we can save somebody from getting hurt from these rituals. If that's happening down here, maybe we'll get some more activity and maybe get some recordings of screams, or if there is a Dogman or Bigfoot out here or whatever, But we mainly went down to try and stop the evil stuff that goes down there, And so him being the federal investigator, he's got that juice, man. He can do that stuff, right? So we go down there, and I have a Mega Blast speaker. And so we go down there into the entrance of this canyon, and we did this for two reasons. We wanted to see if there was more creatures down there, that like a Bigfoot or a Dogman, like just to see, like, is this really going to happen again? Or like if it's real. And there's people doing satanic rituals, and they're going to be hurting a kid or whatever. We want to stop that. So we had multiple motives. So we go down there, and what I do is I play these recordings of a Dogman howl, Dogman screams, and I blast it through that canyon, and it's just horrific screams. And then Raymond puts on, it's like a siren Bigfoot yell. It's like I think from the Sierra Nevadas or whatever, but it's this Bigfoot scream that people have been known to play that, and it's like a challenging to an alpha male, and so they will draw them in because it's like a challenge call. So he started playing that one, and then we gave it, we stopped it, and we had spotlights, but we decided not to have any lights to let our eyes adjust to this. So we start walking down there, and we're going, and all of, we hear little tiny rustling, nothing big. Like last time it was like, so we figured like, oh, it's like raccoons this time or whatever. And all of a sudden, young Atlas, who's a grown man, he screams loud, and he's next to me on the left. I'm on the right side. Young Atlas is in the middle, and Raymond is on the far left. And so young Atlas screams really loud. He goes, "There it is!" And we look in the general area where that he's pointing, because it's pitch black, and we hit our spotlights. And in the hidden behind the trees, I see eye shine. I see this eye shine, bro, and it's looking at us. And I'm trying to get a good look at it. And so I bend down on my knees. I get down, like crouched down to look up because it's big. And I couldn't see it anymore because the direction I went down, the trees and all that blocked it. So I jumped back up and I couldn't see it anymore. But as I was doing that, young Atlas, he began to scream again. and he's a grown man, and he started to cry. And this is the Idaho Fish and Game, and he started to cry, and he's freaking out. And we're like, what's going on? What happened? What did you see? I told him, I seen the eye shine. He says that he saw it was massive black mass with wide shoulders, and the eye span, what freaked him out was the distance between the eyes, the eye shine. He says it was massive, and then it was gone, and then we didn't hear it. And then so we were like, we stayed in that area, and all of a sudden we heard this giant boulder, boom, get thrown in the river. I mean, it's not like a rock, dude. You know, I've done that. We've all done that as a kid. But this is a massive clunk. And it was intense. And we were like, holy crap. Like, did it try to throw it at us or what? What's going on, you know? And so we hit the lights again. And this time we drew the guns. All of us, you know, young Atlas didn't have a gun, but we drew our weapons. And we hit the spotlights. And we were like, man. So we started going away from it. And we couldn't see anything anymore, but we didn't hear anything. And Raymond went back down there the next day or the next couple of days, and he found the boulder. And you couldn't lift it. A man could not lift this boulder, bro. There's no way. And there's no way it rolled down from the canyon rim because it was silence. And all of a sudden, the boulder just splashed. So we know it didn't roll or anything. It was thrown. You know, so we start walking. We press our luck a little more. We're shining our lights, and we have our back to the canyon rim, the cliffs, so nothing can sneak up from behind us. And we start walking, and we go into this little area that, like I told you, Raymond and I have gone on Fridays on our lunch breaks. We'll go, so we know what it looks like in the daytime. And so, but it's easy getting lost. So we get down there. And it's what I like to call the Hobbit area because it looks like from the movie The Hobbit, the trees, right? Just these branches going everywhere. It's so amazing. But we go down there, and again, young Atlas, he screams. He's like, ah! And we turn the flashlight, and a buck deer, this deer that has a massive rack, it comes out of the trees. And its leg is twisted off, bro. Its leg is dangling, its back leg like it was twisted. There was no slashing. There was nothing. It was twisted, bro. And it was dangling, and it was hopping, and it came towards us like it didn't want to leave us. And we're looking at it, and it's looking behind it, and it's coming towards us, and we're backing up, and it has a huge rack of antlers, right? And so we're backing up, and it's coming towards us. And then Raymond says, he goes, dude, we effed up big time. He goes, we interrupted a hunt, guys. We need to get the hell out of here. So we basically hightailed it out of there and kept our spotlights on until we got out of that canyon. And then we left. And that was our Halloween adventure or whatever. We didn't see, we weren't able to stay down there or go far enough into the canyon to see rituals, see if people were trying to conjure stuff up or hurting kids or anything like that. But that was our experience on Halloween night. And like I said, hearing a grown man cry and scream, I've never seen that before. And so that freaked me out hearing. And he's a tough dude for the Idaho Fish and Game. You know, he's a rugged guy, and for him to scream like that and yell, I mean, it was freaky for me. You know, so that kind of is going into my paranormal stuff. And me being a pastor, I do a lot, you know, and Raymond, like I said, he was a pastor as well. So we believe, and we know for a fact that demons are real, that people can get possessed, that houses can get infested with demons, that you can conjure up demons and all through dark arts and all that. So, one time, being at church, this homeless guy walks into the church, and I'm not judging him. Just he looked homeless, kind of rugged everywhere. It looks kind of like he just having a rough time or whatever. He comes in and he starts mimicking and laughing at the pastor that's preaching really loud. He's like, the preacher would say something and he'll say it back really loud and laugh. And I knew right then and there that he had, like, I sensed it, bro. Like, God gave me like a discernment or something where I'm like, this guy something's up with this guy. And we're across the room, right? And I look at him and he locks eyes with me, bro. And I make the mouth movement because he can't hear me because we're so far. I look at him and I say, don't do anything stupid. And I'm not talking to him. I'm talking to what I believe is the demon inside of him. And I look at him. I say, don't do anything stupid. And he gave me the biggest grin, bro, like an unnatural grin, like an ear to ear one where all the teeth were showing. Like it was just really, really, really weird. And then all of a sudden he took off running towards the pastor to the front. And we have ushers there, security and stuff. And so he goes rushing towards the pastor, and the ushers try to stop him. And they grab him, and he wiggles out of them like a snake or like a fish. And he just wiggles out of all their grip. And he goes running the other way. And then all of a sudden he gets down on all fours like an animal. And he starts running like a dog or something all across the church. And he's jumping over chairs. People are screaming or freaking out, and people are grabbing him and they tackle him, and he's clawing, biting, just foaming from the mouth, just crazy. And he's like speaking another language and all kinds of weird stuff. And he keeps slipping out of their hands and running on four legs. And finally, it takes like 8 to 10 people grab him, and I'm one of them included. And we put him on the ground, and he's thrashing and he's screaming and speaking a weird language that we couldn't, and growling and laughing at the same time. And then it was all of us, but I specifically remember placing my hand on him, placing my hand on his shoulder, and praying and casting the demon out, calling the demon out, saying like, "Hey, what's your name, man?" And he's like, "Oh," he'd say a funny language, and I'm like, "Man, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus. I command you in the name of Jesus to come out of him." And when I said that, he screamed really loud and like tried to do one last fight, and he passed out. He just was out. And so everybody got off of him, and I'm like, oh snap, we killed him, like uh-oh. And I'm like moving him, and he's breathing, but he's passed out. So we pick him up, and we again, the guy's like, the whole thing with, what are you gonna do? Call the police and say, hey, there's a dog man that's harassing us in the canyon? Are you gonna call the police and say, hey, this demon possessed guy it takes 8 guys to hold him down? We need you guys. We know there's something else going on. So we pick him up, we take him to the kitchen area, and there's a cot over there, and we lay him on the cot, and he's out. And so I have my ushers that are in the hallway on standby just in case, and I start making this guy a sandwich. I make him I don't remember what kind of sandwich it was, but I made him a sandwich, and he started to wake up, and I got next to him and I gave him a sandwich. I'm like, eat, man. And he takes a bite, and he goes, what the hell just happened? He goes, I was in the Vietnam War, and I've been shot multiple times. I've had bombs blow up next to me, but that doesn't compare to what just happened here. He goes, what the hell happened? I told him, you had a demon inside of you, man. We cast it out in the name of Jesus. You're free. And he looks at me, and he just starts eating a sandwich, and he's confused. And he goes, I don't even remember coming into this church. He goes, I'm not from here. I'm just passing by, man. And I'm like, well, you're welcome to stay. You're welcome to stay. We're here to help you. If you need anything. And he's like, no. He goes, I don't ever want this to happen again. And he gets up and he walks out, and we never see the guy again. And that's one of the stories. Another story that I have is, again, me being the youth pastor, there's a family in my church who the mother is like, she goes back and forth with witchcraft. She tries to be the woman of faith to help her lead her family, to set an example for her girls. But you know how some people struggle with either alcoholic, or they could do drugs, or they could, in the Christian faith, where it's taught that we're supposed to abstain from certain things. And those certain things are like sex out of marriage, or cheating on your wife, violence, preying on, all those things, we're taught, like, God asks us to love our neighbor. That's what it is, like loving people. So this girl, her thing is witchcraft. Because she's a Mexican woman, and it's called brujeria in Spanish, which is witchcraft. And so she would practice witchcraft, and then she would stop it and come to church, and she would do good for a few years, and then she'd fall off her wagon, and she'd go back to it. And so what would happen is like she would hex her husband, and because her husband would cheat on her, and so she would hex him, and he'd go to prison for a year. He'd get out, do okay, and she'd get pissed off at him and hex him again, and he'd go back to prison. So and I know this lady, by the way. They come to our church. She comes very, very seldom, but the kids and the grandma, they all come every week to my youth group. Well, the grandma to the main service, the kids to my youth group. So the grandma calls me one day and asks if I can go and pray for the house. And she says that the husband is back in prison and that he's going to be in there for a long time. And so she goes, I just want to know if you can pray for the house and for the kids, because a lot of weird stuff has been happening. And this is probably like 4 blocks from my house going south. And so it's called South Park area. So I go over there, and when I pull up, there's no glass on the windows. Like the windows are broken out. And I go and I start asking them questions and stuff. And the grandma's telling me like, hey, I think she's doing witchcraft again, because a lot of bad things are happening, and so is back in prison. And so I'm like, yeah, I'm here to pray. Let's go ahead and pray. So I start praying, pray for the kids, and I go inside, and the grandma is a devout Christian woman too, so we're praying together. There's 2 of us, and so I go inside the house, and dude, there's no glass in the house. All the windows are broken out, and all the glass is gone. Like it's really, really weird. Like there's no glass, and in the bathroom, the stove, all that stuff. And so we pray for the house and whatnot, and the house, I guess they were what she believes was a curse or the hex she put on her husband. They were going to lose the house. The bank was going to repossess it, all that stuff. So just a big mess. So they were already packing their stuff because they were going to lose the house, and it was going to be condemned because it was really all this flooding started happening, all these crazy weird things that were going on. So a couple days later, when it was a youth group night, which is on Wednesday nights, the 2 kids come to me, the oldest one and the youngest one. The oldest one she's probably like 19 now, and the youngest one is in junior high. So they come to me, and we're talking. They're like, hey, we have something really bad happen. And I'm like, what? And the oldest one is telling me this. She's like, well, we're in the house, and we're sleeping, and she goes, I heard the door open, and we heard footsteps really loud. She said it sounded like a horse or like a goat or something, like hoofs really loud on the wood floor. And she said it came to her room, and it was her mom's voice. And she said, hey, so-and-so, it's me, let me in. And she began to think like, no, mom's at work, working the night shift right now. Mom's not supposed to be here. And then the knocking again, and the door's not locked. Like this thing could come in anytime, but it couldn't. Like it was asking, or it had no authority to come, or something. It was weird. And so, but it's knocking, and it's saying that it's the girl's mom, let me in. And then the voice gets deeper and deeper. And she said it turned into like a demonic manly voice, and it was pounding on the door. Let me in, let me in. And it was really, as she was crying, she started crying, and she started praying, and she was praying and praying, and her sister was in the next room, and that was the only door. And so she was crying and praying, and she said this thing after it got done pounding and turning the doorknob, and she could hear it walk down the hallway, the heavy hoof prints, and it goes to the next room, and the next room is the smallest girl. So she's telling me her side now. I'm like, what happened? She's like, well, the doorknob started moving and it was knocking. She goes, and then I heard my mom's voice again. It was saying to let me in. And she, again, this girl also knew her mom was at work. So she began to pray. She began to pray, and she was crying. And this thing turned into the loud, manly, demonic voice pounding on the door. And they're both praying at the same time. So finally this thing leaves that door, and it goes to the next door to where the brother's at. But the brother's not there. He's sleeping somewhere else that night. And they could hear the doorknob turn, and the door slams open. And they could hear it walking around, and they start hearing glass shatter. And then it leaves that room, and it starts walking around the house, and they could hear glass break. They could hear, like, for whatever reason, this thing didn't like glass or windows. And it broke everything in the house that was glass. And then they heard it walk out of the house, and they when it walked out of the house, she said she was terrified to even open the door, and they ran together. They called the grandma. The grandma came and picked them up, and that's what they told me. And that's, like, again, guys, like, I don't make this stuff up. It's like I don't have time to do that. I'm a busy man. I have so much going on in my life, but people come to me from their encounters, and they talk to me, and they want prayer, whether if it's cryptid stuff or paranormal stuff. And this past Wednesday, the same two girls came to me, and I'm asking them, like, how's it going? Like, how are things at home? And the house was condemned. They lost the house. They don't live there anymore. They live with their grandma, and the mom moved in with the grandma too. And she says that that there's poltergeist activity going on, that they could hear clinging and clacking, jars getting thrown in the kitchen at night, and they'll pray about it, but the mom won't allow a pastor or anybody of the Christian faith to come into the house and bless it. She'll only allow, like, saging, like to do sage cleansing, and that's what she'll do. But our perspective of it is like, we can go and pray for the home all we want, but if she keeps opening that window to let it back in, it's going to be for no reason. There's not going to be any reason for it to happen. And that's the thing, like, so we pray for the people. We pray for the kids, specifically the kids, that God would guard them and keep them safe, and He has. The enemy, what they do is they could make you afraid. They could put fear in you, but that's it, because you don't give them authority. But the mom won't do anything with cleansing the home, as far as me, because we've offered me and Raymond to go and to get anointing oil, take a few other people and cleanse that whole house, play worship music, lay hands on the wall, anoint all the walls, pray for the property, read scripture out loud, put scripture all around the house. She won't allow any of that. She just wants, like, their brujeria, because there's the white magic and dark magic and all that stuff. And so she's like, we're going to invite somebody in with the white magic to pray in a positive way to cleanse the home. And I don't want to knock anybody. If people practice Wicca or whatever, for me being who I am, I've seen it. My family's been involved in it, and I choose Jesus. That's what I've chosen as a man. I've made that decision, and I've seen demons cast out of people through that name. I've seen houses get cleansed through that name. Speaking of the house, we go, another family calls me up, one of my mom's friends, and the kids, they were starting to come to church a little bit, and I'm not a religious guy. Like I say, I'm like a spiritual guy. I don't follow all these rules and regulations. You got to look this way, dress this way. This is what a person of faith looks like. It's like, I don't follow that. I just have a personal relationship with Jesus, and I follow what the Bible says, not what man or what churches say. It's strictly what the Bible says. So this family gets a hold of my mom and says, hey, can you have Chewy come pray for us? There's something going on with our youngest daughter. And so this girl is like maybe 6 years old. And I guess that she's been talking to people that weren't there, and they are hearing stuff. So I get to this house, and I don't know which girl it is, but I go to this house, and they open the door, and there's like 6 kids. They have 6 kids. One little girl is giving me the ugliest look, bro. Like, she's looking at me like mean, like mad. And so she's a little tiny girl, and so I got pissed off not at the girl, but at whatever was doing this, for preying on this little sweet, innocent little girl. So I start talking to the family. We get together, we get in a circle, we hold hands, and we begin to pray. And when I pray, well, before we started to pray, they put the dogs in the back room, in like the laundry room or whatever. But as we were getting ready to pray, we heard the door open and shut, and all the dogs came running out. And the dogs, jumping on me, and they're like, oh, they're wild, like, get him back out. And the dad goes, and he's like, hey, saying so-and-so, why'd you let him out? And they're like, oh, whoever was supposed to be there is gone. They've been gone for a couple of hours. He's like, what? And he's like, you guys heard the door open, right? I'm like, yeah. He goes, something let the dogs out. And so I knew right then. And so we started to pray. And then I go and I'm like, okay, time to cleanse this house. So I put anointing oil on my hands and I start praying, bro. And when I lay my hands on the walls of this house, dude, the only way that I could describe it is like a metal detector. You know, when you put the metal detector on the ground and it senses metal and it starts to beep and it gives you all these alarms or whatever. That's how it is with demonic stuff. Like they don't like to, like when you lay your hands on somebody and you pray and you have anointing oil, it's like hot coals. Like somebody takes a hot iron and they try to touch you with it, you're gonna run away. You don't want that to happen. So and it feels like a metal detector. Like I could sense where they're at, and so I'm praying, and I'm just have my hands up. I'm on the walls praying for the windows, the rooms, the entrances, exits, and I'm just getting drawn to the basement. I go down to this basement, and dude, it was a heavy, like dark down there, and I just started praying, bro, and it was like the metal detector thing. Like my hands guided me to the corner, and I could feel like a heaviness there, and I kept praying, and it like left. It was gone, and I couldn't find it anywhere in the house. We cleansed that house. You know, again, the family ended up moving to another state. So like this stuff is real. You know, the whole thing. You know, a lot of you guys know about like shadow people and the Hat Man. You know, growing up as a kid, my mom would practice Wicca. At a really young age, I remember her sitting on the floor with a group of people and looking at them and having candles and stuff, not knowing what was going on. And I would see the next day I would see the Wicca book. And again, if anybody who practices that, I'm nobody here. I'm not gonna be like, you know, you're such a bad person and you know God doesn't love you or any of that, man. God loves you so much, and so I've experienced it is what I'm trying to say. And if you practice it, you know what? I love you anyway. But I would hear growling at night in the dark. I was so terrified of the dark as a kid. And I would swear I would hear growling. And I'd get up and I'd go tell my mom. And she'd be in the circle with her friends. And she's like, you're dreaming. Go back to bed. Go back to bed. And I'd be crying, sweating. And I'd go back down and I would hear like scratching and stuff. Weird stuff. And so, and my mom would have these nervous breakdowns. You know, bless her heart. I love my mom, but she would have these mental nervous breakdowns where she'd do good for a few years, and like every 5 years she would have just a serious episode. But my first and memory of these things that she would call them the Hat Man. She would call him the Hat Man, and she would say that the Hat Man is coming to get me. That he's here. He's here. He's coming to get me. And I remember her running to me as a little kid, and she reminded me of a scared little girl. And she would say, he's here, the Hat Man. And I'd go through the house, and I'm like, where are you at? You know, because I'm a little kid mad, like, who's terrorizing my mom? Like, and I didn't believe her. I thought it was like her mental stuff. And so to make her feel better, I'd act like I was the defender as a little kid. And this would happen every few years. And her last outbreak, which was maybe about 7 years ago, I'm at work and my wife calls me. My wife has never experienced this or witnessed it. She says, Chewy, you need to come to your mom's now. She's freaking out really bad. And I'm like, what's going on? They're like, there's 4 of us. They're trying to hold her down. She's just screaming and crying. And so I head straight over there. And again, like at this time, I'm a Christian man now. You know, I gave my life to the Lord back in 2006. And so now I'm a Christian man. And you know, I'm already at this time. I was already being pastoring part time, or I should say, volunteering for the youth. And so I get there, and they're holding her down, and she's kicking and screaming and crying, and saying the Hat Man's back, that he's here for me. And she points to the corner of the house, and it's broad daylight. And there's the corner of the house. It's an old house. There's a shadow in the upper corner of the room. And she's like pointing like he's right there, and nobody's believing her. And at that point, I don't believe her. I'm like, it reminds me as a little kid, like, okay, I'm going to come and I'm going to rescue my mom, you know, make her feel better. It helps bring her out of it. And I'm like, where is he? And she's screaming right there. So I get to that corner and I look up at it, and I'm like, it's you again? Like messing around, like in my mind, I'm doing it for her. and I put my finger up in the corner. I go, you. When I did that, dude, it was ice cold in that corner. And right when I put my hand up there, like the goosebumps on my body, bro, and like the spirit tingles, and it was like instant, came like it was on, like in that very second, all those years of that torment of my mom being tormented by the Hat Man, it all came down like instantly, and I knew, like, man, this is real. It's been revealing itself to her and terrorizing her. Nobody believes her. So I look and I'm freaked out. And I start praying, bro. I start rebuking this thing and I start praying. And all my family's like, whoa, Chewy's really taking it serious. And I'm praying and I'm looking at this corner and she's looking at it. And the darkness starts getting smaller and smaller and smaller until it's a regular little shadow, like a normal shadow. And it was gone. And then she loosened up and she's still crying. She gets up and she starts, we get to give her medication and stuff, and she starts thanking me. She's like, oh, and that day, dude, is when I found out, like, man, the Hat Man, that guy, he's a demon. It's real. And all the times he terrorized her since she was a little girl, bro, following her, showing himself to her at random times where nobody was at, nobody would believe her. She's even gone into mental institutions because of it. She's gone to those places for 2 weeks or whatever at a time because nobody would believe her. But now I know as a Christian man, like, those things are real, very, very real. I got about maybe 10 minutes left, Josh, on this stuff. I'm trying to think now. I've covered a lot of the paranormal stuff, the cryptids, the stuff at my house, bearing the crosses. Nothing here has happened. Just a lot of, but yeah, you could say I've seen a lot and I've been through a lot. And again, I just want to say for our listeners, I don't necessarily always go down to this canyon to look for trouble, to look for Dogman and Bigfoot, especially when I have my family. Dude, this area is southern Idaho. It's all about camping, hiking, and fishing, and the canyon is a place to do it. So if I didn't want to, I just stay home 24/7. If I go outside, it's right down the street. And so I've chosen not to live in fear. I've chosen, like, you know what, this is my home, right? This is the place that God put me to live in Twin Falls and the beautiful canyon. Like, so we go down there still. We go down there and we hike. We'll go and take my little barbecue grill and we'll barbecue down there by the river. And it's a great time, we do it, but we don't go at night. When we go packing guns. You best believe that. We let people know when we go and when we should be coming out.
Chewy, what an amazing 2 hours worth of stories and content you've had to share, man. Listen, you have literally given me and all of us so much great information, stories, encounters, sightings. I think we're going to have to do a part 2 to this because I literally probably have about 10 to 20 questions that I feel like you and I could really riff back and forth and go into detail. Unfortunately, everybody, Chewy does not have enough time today to get into that because it'd probably end up being like a 5-hour episode. So I'm gonna have to let him go here very shortly. But he has sent me probably about 10, 20 pictures, and I'm gonna be showing those. I'm probably gonna be linking those in the description below. So I'm sure you've heard him mention multiple times throughout this podcast that he sent me pictures. Again, I will show those and I will put those in the description below for all of you to check out. Like I said, man, are you going to be down for doing a part 2 where it'll just kind of be a Q&A?
Dude, absolutely. I would love to do a Q&A and speaking with my friend Raymond, again, it's so cool when you get a federal investigator, that and I've sent Josh all my personal information to verify that I'm legit and who I am, and we can do the same thing for Raymond. Just so I like to have the legitimacy of it, but not to give that out because we want to protect our identities and whatnot. But Raymond he would love to come and share also. He's got a lot of stuff, and being a federal investigator on top of it, he's got some, it's talking about portals and all kinds of crazy stuff that like that the government that tells him about. So it's pretty intense.
So you heard it first, ladies and gentlemen. So basically what we're going to do, everybody, and Chewy included, so we will bring Chewy back for a part 2. It'll be a massive, probably 2-3 hour Q&A. because again, I got a lot of notes here that unfortunately we don't have really any time to cover, but a lot of good stuff. And then we're probably going to do a part 3 in which his friend Raymond is going to come on the show, and we are going to have another big 3-way conversation, and it's going to be pretty great. So if there's anything else you'd like to add, Chewy, before we end the show, go ahead and let me know.
Well, I just want to thank you for letting me come on the show, and these encounters and these stories, man, putting it out there for people to hear. And if you've been through this or going through this, to where these creatures will follow you home, putting the crosses and anointing them, like it has stopped, and like the whole spiritual stuff, if you guys are going through any of that, man, like I would say, like, pray and reach out to somebody, to Josh, reach out to him. And for those who are who know about my area, like, you go down there, enjoy it. It's beautiful. Don't go at night. And if you go in the day, dude, stick to the trails, and just, go with a group of people. Cause I don't really recommend going down there. I believe it's solely the protection of God that has protected me, because I've done a lot of stupid stuff, as you guys heard, down here, and I believe it was God that has protected me. Because I think if they wanted me, I think they could have had me to some point, but for whatever reason they didn't, or they couldn't.
Once again, Jesus kind of holds all the power here, as proved by many of your stories. And just, for any of you listening, many of the encounters that I've shared on my channel, from whether it be ex-Satanist or people who practice dark magic, any of those things, for whatever reason, there's just truth in Jesus, and these things fear that name for a reason. So whether you're skeptical, agnostic, atheist, it's definitely something I would look into with an open mind and look out more, because, again, there's a reason. So without further ado, Chewy, is there any other last notes you want to add?
No, I think that's it. And maybe on another note, Raymond is still really adamant about stopping the rituals and stuff that are happening on Halloween night. So I believe we're going to go again on Halloween night to go see what's down there, and hoping to stop something and maybe get some activity or whatever,
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully we can hear a bunch of that in part 3. So I hope you guys all enjoyed this very, very awesome episode. It's been a pleasure, Chewy. I can't wait to have you on for part 2. We're going to be all really looking forward to that.
Awesome, bro. Thank you.
Absolutely, man. I will speak to you very shortly. And everybody listening, get ready for part 2, where it's going to be a massive Q&A. And I will see you all in the future. Take care, everybody.